He was considered one of the greatest running backs to ever play in college football as well as the pros. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the first NFL running back to rush for more than 2,000 yards in a season, won the Heisman Trophy. O.J. Simpson had that smile. He was in movies. He was in commercials. He was the it guy until he went on trial in the early 90s for killing his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman. He was acquitted in 1994 of the brutal slayings. And ever since then, the name O.J. Simpson has been said with cursing, with shame, with shocking statements. He died at the age of 76. His family announced that he succumbed to cancer. They posted this message on social media. On April 10th, our father, Orenthal James Simpson, succumbed to his battle with cancer. He was surrounded by his children and grandchildren during this time of transition. His family asks that you please respect their wishes for privacy and grace. The Simpson family. He was nicknamed the Juice. As I said, broke numerous records, but it was that case many call the murder trial of the century that changed America's view of O.J. Simpson. Many folks remember the police car, the slow police chasing that white Ford Bronco during the NBA Finals that had the nation riveted. Some 95 million Americans watched that 2-hour, 60-mile low-speed chase through Los Angeles. He stood trial for the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Simpson in October 1995 when he was acquitted. 12 years later, O.J. Simpson was arrested after leading a group of men into a Las Vegas hotel casino to steal at gunpoint what he said was his own sports memorabilia. He was charged with several felony counts, including kidnapping and armed robbery. The following year, he was found guilty and sentenced up to 33 years in prison. He was paroled on October 1st, 2017. O.J. then moved to Florida, where he often played golf every day, posting videos, things of that nature on social media, commenting on all sorts of stories. Mark Watts was a CNN correspondent at CNN covering that trial. He joins us right now. Mark, you also played football at the University of Washington, and so your perspective here is not just from a media standpoint covering the trial, but also as a wide receiver playing for the Huskies. And I mean, O.J. Simpson was a USC Pac-10 god when he played there, and he was still seen that way in the NFL.
Yeah, and I also worked for the National Football League at one time as well. Condolences to the Simpson family. Arnell, Sydney, Justin, and Jason lost their father today. And whenever I talk about the Simpson case, I also want to acknowledge that two people also tragically lost their lives, Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. What was the question again regarding the question? Yeah. Sad day for all of us.
Well, in terms, I mean, he was a, you know, prior to obviously the trial. I mean, O.J. Simpson was a god at USC in the Pac-10, one of the most revered athletes in college and pro football history. But all of that changed when he was charged with these two murders.
Absolutely. Yep. Anybody who played high school football in the 80s and in the early 90s and played running back, we all wanted to wear 32 because the Juice or Jim Brown. That's how far back his legacy goes. But yes, as you said, Roland, unfortunately, he did not live a great life past 1995. It took a toll on him. He came down with prostate cancer, and he succumbed to it this morning in Las Vegas.
When you think about, I mean, the ramifications and the blowback even today, when you look at a number of people who've actually offered their condolences on social media, they have been immediately attacked. And so even in death, O.J. Simpson still engenders a lot of strong feelings from people.
Right. He cultivated a lot of enemies along the way. And I sat through all 16 months of that case. There were four principal reasons why the prosecution failed to win conviction in that case. It was the DNA evidence. It was sloppy evidence gathering. Mark Furman was portrayed by the defense team as a racist rogue cop who could have possibly planted the right-handed glove at O.J.'s Rockingham address. And then there was a botched glove demonstration as well. That took place June 15th, 1995, where O.J., although the fact that he was sort of a B-league actor, he convinced the jury on that day that the glove, the left-handed glove, did not fit. He couldn't pull it over the palm of his hand entirely. So, yeah, when the verdict finally came out, October 3rd, 1995, it was largely split, and the verdict was a polarizing event in the United States of America. 60 to 70% of whites felt that O.J. Simpson was guilty. 60 to 70%, even a larger percentage of African Americans in Los Angeles felt O.J. Simpson was not guilty. Was it a revenge verdict, if you will, for what happened in the Rodney King not guilty verdicts of the officers who beat Rodney King? And there was also a case that was known as the Soon Jadu murder case. She shot Latasha Harlins, a teenager who was accused of stealing less than a $2 container of orange juice. So at that time in the early 90s, Los Angeles was a powder keg. It was an explosive community. And I've got this on pretty good source because I did exit interviews with most of the jury members following the trial. So what I said about what led to the not guilty verdict, you can bank on that. I got that from their mouths, how they interpreted the trial.
From a media standpoint, when you look at even how his death is being covered, there are some people who are upset that folks even talk about the O.J. Simpson the pre-murder O.J. Simpson. But the reality is, if you're looking at the life of somebody, you cannot overlook the fact that O.J. Simpson was a darling among Madison Avenue. Not only was he a highly successful college football player and pro football player, winner of the Heisman Trophy, again, become the first to break the 2,000-yard barrier in the NFL. But, man, when he retired, I mean, he was in commercials. He was on Monday Night Football. He was in movies. I mean, he was the guy America loved. That's also the reality of O.J. Simpson's life and legacy.
Right. He had built himself so high up there, Roland. And you know, because you're a journalist and you've covered major trials before, our society loves the fall from grace. He was everything that you just said. He was also this. Not even Jim Brown could accomplish this. O.J. was the first Black American athlete in the United States, first African-American athlete to receive major sponsorship and endorsement from large cap and major corporations in the United States. Before LeBron, before Magic, before anybody, there was O.J. So we have to give O.J. his props, as you said, for the doors that he broke open, for the barriers that he ran through. It's unfortunate, however, that he is known for something infamously, what sort of brought me onto your show tonight.
Isn't it also, I think it's also interesting that when we look at this, I mean, look, he was acquitted in 1995. You're talking about next year, 30th anniversary. This trial, everything around this case still is riveting today. A person who is Gen Z today may not fully understand how shook, how divided this country was when it came to the arrest, the trial, everything around it. I mean, it absolutely captured everything in America.
Yeah, it was all that. I remember it was pretty much the only story that I covered for 16 months, from June 94 all the way to October 95. It was the only story that I was assigned to as a CNN correspondent based in Los Angeles. It was also this. It was America's first unscripted reality show. This was before there was such a household term as reality television. O.J. Simpson was the trial was the first unscripted reality show that the world had ever seen. And I'll never forget it. On verdict day, I was wrapping up an interview with constitutional law professor Alan Dershowitz. And someone came up behind me and said, "Hey, Watts, this is a reality show." And Professor Dershowitz and I looked back like this, and we said, "Reality show? What's he talking about?" And I excused Professor Dershowitz because he had to get upstairs because the verdict was about ready to be read. But yeah, it was all that. So many people were fighting to get on the jury panel. It was a reality show and such a highly publicized court case. It generated astronomical ratings for CNN. It led to so many spin-offs. People who names you'll know: Greta Van Susteren, Dan Abrams, Cynthia McFadden. It was just so many spin-offs where people got their own television shows. Attorney Johnny Cochran also had a show. There were so many things that sprouted from this because it was so huge. Everybody was fixed on watching what was coming out of this trial, just because O.J. transcended so many cultural spectrums in the United States. As you said, there was Hollywood, there was NFL, it was Monday Night Football. He was a sideline announcer. Sports, Hollywood, media, good-looking guy, great-looking ex-wife, him being accused of murdering her, and just everything else that was rolling along with the city of Los Angeles at that time. It was just the place where major news broke, and I don't know how I got stuck in all of it, but I was there for all of it. I had a front row seat pretty much to history as it tilted on its axis. No, Roland, I do remember how I got there. Oh, man, you didn't have to do that.
Come on now. Come on now.
Now, look at that. I've aged like fine wine. I think I gave you those glasses, didn't I? But yeah, that was June 13th. That was pretty much positioned.
Had to go into the crates.
Yeah. That was June 13th. I was outside OJ's house at 425 Rockingham. That was in Brentwood, well-to-do western suburb of Los Angeles. And yeah, I was positioned outside his house for about 12 to 15 hours all the way until the Bronco chase on June 17th. Your beloved Houston Rockets were playing the New York Knicks. I remember that well. I was on Larry King's show running around crazy, chasing OJ in a white Bronco driven by Al Cowlings, hoping that he didn't commit suicide. There's just so many iconic, wild days that I remember covering that case. And it's just something that just will never go away. The reason, Roland, it sticks with people today is because the truth has never been told. The real truth has never been told. All these pundits and all these reporters such as myself will go on TV today, tonight, and tomorrow and give their opinions. But the real truth has never been told. And I believe there is one single objective factual truth. And that's what I've been chasing for 30 years. As people get older and they want to get things off their chests, things just sort of arrive in your inbox. Notes and recollections and things that people said. I believe I'm close, really, seriously. I'm being serious now. I believe I'm very close to the real truth. And when I get it, I'm going to come to you because you're my favorite journalist, of course, and we're going to talk about it because that's what people want to know. Even the 67% of African Americans across the country who felt that O.J. Simpson was not guilty, there's a shred of doubt, like, what happened? What happened to the murder weapon? Why was there not more blood inside the Bronco? What happened to the bloody clothing? How could a guy supposedly kill two people that fast, get back to his house, get in a limousine, go to LAX? But here's one fact I'll leave you with. I don't know how much time we have. Something has never sat with me, and it hasn't sat with me for 30 years. O.J. Simpson was strip searched down to his underwear on June 13th, one day supposedly after he allegedly killed his ex-wife and Ron Goldman. It was a bloody crime scene, Roland. I saw it with my own two eyes. It was a bloody mess. There was some serious altercations that took place. But what I can't figure out is if O.J. Simpson supposedly carried out those two murders, and Ron Goldman had defense wounds on his hands, and he had slash wounds on his sneakers. When they examined O.J. Simpson on June 13th, the very next day, remember, he did not have a single cut, abrasion, or bruise except a small cut on this finger on his left hand. Now, Roland, you and I have scrapped. We've been in some scraps before. I'm going to get a few in, you get a few in. You might win the fight, I might win the fight, but we're going to walk away from a fight bruised. We're going to have a cut. We might have signs of trauma. He had none of that on June 13th. And that's what's puzzled me for 30 years. And that's what's pushed me as a journalist. Although I do have an opinion of what happened, I want to find the truth. I want to find that one single truth, that incontestable, factual truth, so I can tell the world what really happened.
Mark Watts, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Go to my panel for perspective. Reese, you first.
That was a riveting interview, Roland. I have to say, for me, I grew up in Los Angeles. So I lived through LaTarsha Harlan. I lived through Rodney King, Reginald Denny as well, and the OJ trial. And so I want to speak up for Black people during that time. I know a lot of people have opinions about his guilt or innocence, particularly from a 2024 lens. But I want to say that while there might have been some Black people who looked at it as a get back, I believe as a person who grew up in LA, who followed the trial as a Los Angeles resident, that a majority, I would dare say, and Mark just gave the statistics about the number of Black people who thought he was innocent or not guilty, we felt that way because of the evidence that was presented at trial. And so I just want to be clear that this whole notion that Black people were bloodthirsty, unhinged, irrational, just trying to get a lick back, I don't believe that's really accurate, not for a majority of Black people. I think that Black people largely, and as he said, even a larger number of people and Black people in Los Angeles thought that he was not guilty, we followed the evidence. And so people are entitled to their opinions. I think reasonable people can have different conclusions, different convictions about this case. Obviously, it's tragic that 2 lives were lost. But I just want to, for me, bat down the idea that Black people are just unhinged, irrational, just loyal to OJ strictly because he's Black, as opposed to the fact that this was a trial that captivated our area for 16 months. It was followed very closely. And look, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. At the end of the day, the prosecution didn't do their job. Johnny Cochran and OJ's team did their job. We'll never know, I guess, what happened. He didn't go down confessing to anything. And, we don't know. But I just don't like the narrative. And I think it's very easy in 2024 to be on your high horse about your convictions, about whether he's guilty, or even if you feel like he's not guilty. But back then, I'm glad that you provided that historical context about how the environment we were in and the way that the actual case was presented at the time and how we drew our conclusions.
Lauren.
I think what the case always represented was it was really the first time ever in a major court case in a major way that a Black person sort of got away with murder, quite frankly. And that never happens. That was probably the first time in American history that had ever happened. And the reason he got away was because he had the resources to represent himself with some of the best attorneys in the country. Barry Scheck at the time, who would later found the Innocence Project, was the foremost attorney on forensics. He had F. Lee Bailey, he had Alan Dershowitz, and of course he had the great Johnny Cochran. And that's unheard of for a Black defendant anytime, any place. It upset the natural order of what our history has been in the United States. People get away with murder all the time. We still sit here not knowing how Natalie Wood died. We still sit here with the story of Byron de la Beckwith, who sat around, walking around for years, no justice served. Obviously, Carolyn Bryant. People get away with all sorts of things, but he was the first Black guy that got away with it. And I think it was quite noted by everybody at the time, but I don't know that they really articulated it in that way at the time. And that documentary, OJ Made in America, really goes into a lot of the sort of dynamics that are really not talked about in any nuance when it comes to OJ Simpson. But it was a terrible thing, though, that 2 people were murdered. And it's not something that we should just, shrug off. But I think we do have to understand the perspective. We have always had to deal with, as African Americans, the lack of justice. When Lyndon Johnson told the FBI to go find Shorna Goodman and Cheney, they went down there and found the bodies of other people who had disappeared in the South because they'd been lynched and nobody cared. So we, I think, as Black folks, have known that history forever. I think white folks don't know that history. And when OJ got away with it, it was a huge thing because of that primary reason. That wasn't supposed to happen. And it happened because he had the money. And it happened because, quite frankly, his attorneys were way better than Marsha Clark and what was the other dude's name? It was
Christopher Darden.
Chris Darden.
Thank you. And Chris Darden.
Darden.
And they couldn't keep up. Chris Darden and Marsha Clark could not keep up. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Greg Carr.
Absolutely. Yeah, they couldn't keep up. Soft racism. Today is a day where we see that nothing has changed in America. This is not a nation. White folk mad as hell on social media. Black folk are largely silent or making jokes. But remember what Jackie Robinson said at Jesse Jackson said at Jackie Robinson's funeral. He said Jackie has passed away and now he is stolen away home where referees are not allowed. Ironically, Jackie Robinson, another great tailback, except he played across town at UCLA a generation before OJ. But today, the juice is loose. Meaning what? You can't get him. That white woman and that white man were killed, and somebody got to pay. As you say, Lauren, he had better lawyers. Chris Darden, up to that time, had 18 straight, I think, convictions on his side with the prosecutor's office. But Johnny Cochran had never been beaten by the LAPD and by the LA prosecutors, and he wasn't beaten that day. I showed my students the footage, because that famous footage. And by the way, Monique Presley said on social media today, she was one of those Howard Law students that was in that famous scene in the split screen where all the law students are embracing and cheering at the verdict. And my students, these Gen Zers, as you're talking about, Roland, they sat there riveted and felt the same things we felt in 1994 and 1995. In other words, this wasn't about guilt or innocence. And one correction, Black people didn't feel that he was not guilty. He was not guilty. He said something called beyond a reasonable doubt. And you're right, Reese. I mean, Mark Furman, a stone cold racist. Look, Johnny Cochran's team put on a clinic in how to prosecute. They didn't call all the witnesses they wanted to. It was like Ali and Zaire in 74. They didn't throw all the punches they needed. They just let this thing kind of tease out. The evidence, the chain of custody, everything was put into play. And ultimately that verdict came back not guilty. But what happened? You wait until OJ busts in a room because you got some of his old trophies and his mama's photo album and got a gun and some boys with him, and you get him for kidnapping and you get him for assault, and he goes to jail. Why? Somebody got to pay. And then you hound him over and over again. This isn't about OJ guilt or innocence. This is about a country in which race is at the foundation of its identity. OJ Simpson is the reason we know some damn Kardashians. Remember, Robert Kardashian was on that team. Everything from the Kardashians to TMZ. The guy who founded TMZ was one of the people who got caught up in that media circus. Jeffrey Toobin with the New Yorker and CNN until he messed up, and now he's back again. Why? Because if you white, you can have second and third and fourth chances. But OJ didn't have second and third chances. Finally, this is, I think, perhaps the most interesting thing of all today for me. One of my young brothers came over to the law school Wednesday night, my class last night, and he had on a T-shirt with, looks like one of his homeboys, his partners. And I said, who is that, man? He says, my man, he was killed in Chicago. I said, did they find who killed him? He said, they don't solve murders in my city. Here's the bottom line. White life in this country is the only life that's valuable to a lot of people. O.J. Simpson represented everybody who has been punished for losses of white life, whether he wanted to or not. The famous "I'm not black, I'm O.J." was said when Cochran was saying this is about race, this is about black. And O.J. Simpson responded to Johnny Cochran and said, yeah, black, I get that, but I ain't black, I'm O.J., meaning what? Dude, I'm the one that's going away if you don't save me. It didn't mean, regardless of O.J.'s opinions, that he was not a proxy for race. And what we are faced today with is the fact that the responses to the death of O.J. Simpson show us not only haven't we come very far, we haven't come far at all.
That's true.
Indeed.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.